Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and I'm out for a walk before I have an all-day meeting inside, which is just going to be, it's a Zoom meeting. It's an 8-hour Zoom meeting. I presume we get an hour off in the middle, but yeah, it's going to be something. This is also one of the rare moments when I've had to remake an episode. I can probably count on my hands the number of times I've remade an episode in the 7 years I've been doing this podcast. But every now and again, I will, for some reason, either a bad microphone or inattentive thinking, I will forget to hit record. Whatever, I'll have to redo a whole episode. This might be the first time, however, that I'm redoing the episode and completely changing what I'm saying. Yesterday, I went for a walk to the post office and back, and that post office is about a 25-minute walk, so I actually recorded 2 episodes, except that I forgot to hit record when I left the post office, so I only recorded 1 episode. So that's the episode I'm re-recording. And the episode I'm making is what I'm returning to. This is the 12th episode of this type that I've made in the 7 years we've done it. I looked back over the timeline. I used to do this when I first started doing it. I did it every couple months. For the last 3 issues of this, last 3 of these, I've done it about once a year. It's been about 8 months since I did this. The last time was August or July of 2023. And so it seems apropos that it's time for another The Geek Asks. In case you're new to the podcast or newer, The Geek Asks is a sequence in which I open up the Boardgamegeek Forums and I look at the recent posts and I just read the subject line, and then I assume that that subject line is in fact a question for me to answer on my podcast. I don't read the posts that they have written, so sometimes I have to guess what they're talking about, but I find it's a nice way to ponder different aspects of the board game hobby without having to do a lot of planning. So weirdly, I did this yesterday. I did the whole thing, and then I got to the end and realized I hadn't recorded it. So in doing it today, I'm not going back to find those same threads I looked at yesterday. I'm just looking at the most recent threads today. There may be some overlap, but it's been a whole day, and the Board Game Geek forums move quickly, so the odds that I'll find the same thread again are low, unless it's a very busy thread, in which case it's near the top of the recents again. All right, well, let's get into it. So the first thread I see here is, all right, I'm skipping a couple. Top 5 game night accessories. This is a good one. I think I've done a podcast about this or about similar ideas. Those will be in the thread if they are. So thinking about holding a game night, what kinds of accessories are best for a game night specifically? So when I think about what the top 5 game night accessories are, I have to think about game night versus just game playing. I think those are different lists, and I may not have made a top 5 game night list, but off the top of my head, I'm going to say number 1, a good folding table that's not your game table. So if your house is like ours, our main game table is the dining room table. When we have people over to play games, that's where we play, but that means we don't have a place to put appetizers and stuff. So we have a good, nice long, like 6-foot or 8-foot folding table that we set up to put all the snacks and stuff on. And then we also have individual card tables or lap tables that we put in between the seats for people to actually put their food on, so it's not on the gaming surface itself. Second, we have a good game mat that fits the table really well. This is an excellent investment because it makes the gameplay really fun. A nice neoprene mat makes the gaming surface easy to use, and I think it works really well. The only downside to ours is our table is a large oval, and the gaming mat we have doesn't quite fit it. That's 2. Number 3 game night accessory, I would say a good way to play some mood music for the game. I don't think any of these is all that original, by the way, but a good way to play some mood music. We have a sort of Google Home thing, which is kind of like an Amazon speaker or whatever right near the table. So one of us will stream music from our phone onto that as mood music for the table. I recommend using Melodice, melodice.org as your game music space of choice. they have these YouTube lists, and somehow they play them without commercials, and you are able to listen to these music lists that fellow members of Board Game Geek or the Board Game Forum, board game community have put together to go with games. So I like that a lot. That's 3. Number 4 for game night accessory, I will say snazzy resources. I have a little shelf full of snazzy resources that I've accumulated, and we use those for substitutes for resources when we're playing. Like when we play Orleans, for instance, we'll substitute in the snazzy resources for the discs that the game comes with, or the squares that the game comes with. Just elevates the experience a little bit. And then number 5, I'll say good lighting. If you don't have good lighting, you don't have a good game time. So those are my 5. They're not really accessories so much as like, what do you need to do to set up a good gaming experience? That's a little different than accessories, but that's what I have. All right, so that is top 5 game night accessories. Anyone an early riser want to play a game, ? If I ended up in a different situation than I'm in now, which is normally when I go to game cons now, I'm going with XYZ Game Labs as part of their crew working on games. As a reminder, if you've never heard me mention that before, I am a partner at XYZ Game Labs. So when we go to cons, we generally are working them, so I don't really get to sit and play games very much. But if and when I do, yes, getting up early and meeting someone to play a game would absolutely be something I'd want to do. I love that idea. Here someone wrote in 1960, the making of the president versus Watergate. This is an interesting thing to consider. 1960, the making of a president versus Watergate. So 1960 is a really interesting game. It's interesting and thoughtful, and plays on the card-driven genre. You know, it's very similar to Twilight Struggle that way. And it involves back and forth wrestling for control of the country. Watergate is the same kind of game, but functions a little bit differently, and I think I don't like it as much. It's shorter, which does go in its advantage, but ultimately I think 1960 feels like a more legitimate struggle to me. Like it's something I'm not really happy that Nixon was running, but at the time he wasn't corrupted and destroying the democracy the way that he would later or attempt to. Versus Watergate, it feels like there is one side that's clearly in the right, and if you're playing the Nixon player, you're just trying to cover up your crimes. I don't really find that very compelling. So for me, it's the theme that drives which game I'd rather play. And 1960, the making of the president, is the game for me. How do you decide when you should not try to publish a game? So this is a tricky thing, but the real element of it is, are you getting consistent positive feedback from your playtesters? So, I mean, there are lots of times where you might decide to abandon a design. In our process, we start with monkeying around with something. We say, is there something here? If there is something here, great. If not, either we'll tinker with it no more to see if we can get there to be something here, or we'll set it aside and, maybe pick up that idea later in some other way. Then the next step is getting a prototype together, really making the game kind of work well for us. Do we think this works well? Are we willing to subject it to other people? We generally jump into playtesting with other people as quickly as we can. Then when we play with other people, we're like, is this fun? What part of it is fun? Do you like it? Do you think it's a game you might be interested to play again? Sort of asking questions to get people to think about what they thought of the game and articulate that. And if you're getting consistent no's there, that's another place to drop it. The third one is, as you're pushing toward the end, when you're sort of in a more finalized form or closer to finalized form, talking to people about it, doing blind play testing, one of the questions I'll have to ask is, would you buy this? Is this a game that, if you can imagine it in a more completed form or a more professionally published form, is this a game you'd buy? And if you get consistent no's on that, then that's a real warning sign to try not to try to publish the game. If you can't drum up interest with people you're directly playing it with, how are you going to get interest from people who don't have a chance to play it? So that is the steps I see in the question of how do you decide when to not try to publish a game. Now it gets more complicated if you are paying for the publication yourself or if you are kickstarting the publication. Those are two different goals. The advantage of kickstarting, of course, is that you have to drum up interest in the game in order to publish the game. And if you aren't able to drum up sufficient interest, then you don't publish it. But you often have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars getting ready to do the Kickstarter. So there is sunk cost there if the Kickstarter fails. Let's see. Can someone help me find this game? ? I see 1 thumbs up and no reactions. So maybe not. I need help identifying a game. 11 reactions. I bet someone did help them find it with 11. Too many bones, teacher? I mean, I probably wouldn't call out a teacher for having too many bones. I don't even know how you'd tell. Are they like freakishly shaped? Or I don't even know what it means to say somebody has too many bones. Oh, do you mean someone to teach you too many bones? I wonder how you look for that on BoardGameGeek. It's in the BGG Spring. It's in the BGG Spring forum. So they're looking for someone to come to BGG Spring or who's going to be there to teach them too many bones. Okay. Question for those who have stored games on painted shelves. Oh, interesting. Is the question, does the paint rub off on the games? I might, if I were using painted shelves, I might get some contact paper and put it on the surface that the games are going to be sitting on, just to be sure that they don't stick. Because depending on the kind of paint you use, setting stuff on a painted surface could cause some trouble. Someone asked in the BGG Spring forum, I wonder what the freebies were. Does that mean that they ran out? That's a bummer. I know BGG Spring sort of famously has a lot of freebies. Oh man, Game Nerds deal of the day, Great Western Trail 2nd Edition Rails to the North expansion. That is something that's been on my purchase list because Great Western Trail is a game I like. I'm terrible at it. Literally terrible. I've never won a game. But I know Rails to the North is really the essential expansion for that game. And everybody who likes Great Western Trail says like this is the special sauce. So I have been keeping my eye out for that at some point. And it looks like there was a deal of the day that I missed. Oh well. Lunch Hour Gaming, San Juan, Roll for the Galaxy, Jump Drive. What's next? Well, it feels like with those 3, Res Arcana ought to be on your list. Now, Res Arcana can run a little long depending what kind of lunch hour you have. If you actually have a lunch hour, Res Arcana should be fine. But that game fits right in with those others. In fact, I think it's better than any of those others. I mean, Race for the Galaxy is fine, but I think Res Arcana is better. If you're looking for something that's not Ton Lehman produced, you could do Oh My Goods. That's a really good one that's not super long. Bonanza runs a little bit long, I think. Matainai is about 20 minutes. The first couple games are rough because they take a long time to learn. But a game of Matainai rarely goes over a half hour. So that's an excellent lunchtime game. And it's flexible enough and deep enough that there's a lot of room to grow in that one. Definitely go for that. All right, you have time for 1 or 2 more. Database into Libib. This will be my last one. I saw this question yesterday. If you don't know what Libib is, it is an app that you use to manage your collections of things at your house. Our family uses it to manage our books. It has a barcode scanner and then it knows what the book is most of the time. And we use it to keep track of what books we have and where they are in the house. So if you're looking for a book, you can look it up in Libib and be like, oh, it's on the basement bookshelves. But more importantly, when you're going to buy a book, you can look it up and see, do we already have it? Because with my daughter's interest in literature and our interest in literature and my father-in-law's interest in literature, it's really common for us to get books and not realize they're in the house. And so we've had times where somebody buys a book and they come home and they're like, look at this new book I got. And like, we have that book already. And that's always a bummer. You have to go back and return it. So we use Libib as a stopgap. When you're going to buy a book, you check Libib to make sure we don't already have it. It works great. I did notice a couple weeks ago that they have a board games function when you're making a new shelf. You can say a board game shelf, and that's great, except that when you try it, the barcode scanner doesn't have any items in it, and the database doesn't exist. You have to manually enter everything. And the idea is it's a shared database, so as you manually enter things, other people can use those manual entries. But to start with, it stinks, and you can't use the barcode scanner. As far as I can tell, you can't scan the barcode into the system. If you could do that, maybe I would participate. But as it is, you can't really use Libib to document your board game library without a ton of work. And so this person's asking, is it possible to get the Board Game Geek library archive database into Libib? I suspect Board Game Geek would not want them to do that. That's their whole thing. Like, Board Game Geek's whole thing is their archive or their database. So giving it away to another company feels unlikely. I'll be interested to see what happens, though. I'm going to check out that forum, and you should too. If you're interested in any of these threads, there will be links in the show notes to those particular threads on Board Game Geek, so you can go see what people said, see if I knew what I was talking about when I made suggestions. Well, that brings me to the end of my walk today. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. Specifically, dang it. Of course, I'm walking right by a lawnmower now. And needing somebody at a con to play a game. And so when we go to... So for game night, you need to have a way to host... Oh, come on.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.